Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for this press conference. My name is Siviwe Gwachube. I am the DA's national spokesperson and the spokesperson on the health portfolio. I am joined this afternoon by my colleague, who's the Shadow Minister for Finance, Jordan Hill-Lewis, and we will be taking you through our press statement this morning with regards to what we are calling for in terms of further parliamentary steps that we're going to be taking regarding the vaccine rollout plan. Once we've gone through our press statement, we will then be taking questions on our Zoom platform, and we will alternate, and you can indicate which media house you are from and who and which to whom the question is directed to, and we will be responding to your questions accordingly. As of this morning, the Democratic Alliance has written to the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Thandi Modise, requesting that she establishes an ad hoc committee that will essentially perform an inquiry into South Africa's vaccine rollout plan. We are of the view that this entire program from 15 months ago when the pandemic hit our shores, that this program has been marred by both avoidable and unavoidable delays, unnecessary delays, and has been marred by incredible mistakes and missteps from government. And it is absolutely crucial that Parliament takes its rightful place as the legislature in terms of establishing exactly what has gone wrong and what has gone right when it comes to this vaccine rollout plan. We're of the view that the Speaker is empowered to do so in terms of the National Assembly Rule 2531B, and we're of the view that she should take this opportunity. We've seen in the Zondo Commission repeatedly how Parliament was said to have almost aided and abetted the state capture that happened in our country because Parliament did not exercise its role of holding the executive to account. And so we are of the view now that the Speaker is well within her rights to establish this ad hoc committee that would form an inquiry into the entire vaccine acquisition and rollout plan for South Africa so that we can get to the bottom of who is to be held responsible for where things have gone wrong. And so we can also ensure that Parliament is at the center of finding and enforcing accountability for this very crucial plan and possibly the biggest crisis to hit South Africa to date. This is not the first time that Parliament would have had to establish an inquiry of this nature. There is absolute precedent in Parliament, the most recent being in 2018 with the Eskom inquiry, and the outcomes of which were essentially fed into the Zondo Commission. And we are of the view that this is possibly one of the biggest tests of Parliament since democratic South Africa. And so we are of the view that hopefully our request to the Speaker will be met with agreement that this ad hoc committee needs to go on. There's particular rules which pertain to how an ad hoc committee of this nature will be can be constituted. It will be a multi-party ad hoc committee. It would have powers to be able to summon people to Parliament, to be able to conduct an investigation and a full investigation to ensure that there's accountability. However, we've made a strong case to the Speaker that my colleague now, Jordan, is going to be taking us through to exactly state why it is that we think that government should be investigated for its role in terms of this vaccine rollout.
Well, thank you very much, Siv, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, everyone who's joining us from the press and those watching at home. It's great to have you with us. Let me say that I think that South Africans are rightly extremely angry with the rollout of our country's vaccine program. The fact is that our vaccines have arrived way too late and they are not enough for South Africa's needs. And that means that many millions of South Africans, everyone currently under the age of 60, but even those over the age of 60 who are still waiting for their SMSs, are living in constant anxiety and fear of this virus. And our country is going through another cycle of lockdowns and the third wave of infections now. This wave, and possibly further waves to come, would have been avoidable had we had a proper, timeous, proactive vaccine rollout organized by our government. But that has not happened. And South Africans should and are rightly angry and fearful about this. And that is why we are calling for a full-scale parliamentary inquiry to find out exactly where this went wrong, what mistakes were made and by whom, and who should be accountable for them. Now, there are a couple of mistakes that we know from the public record. Firstly, we know that government put all of its eggs in the COVAX basket in the middle of 2020 and didn't bother to or proactively seek to engage with other suppliers of vaccines to secure a supply for our country. When they did that, they also then missed several deadlines. We know from questions to the finance minister late in November and December of 2020 that not one but two payment deadlines were missed for the COVAX payment. And that means that we have still not to date received a single dose of COVAX vaccine. Even then, there was another fundamental mistake in that when the government woke up to the idea of looking elsewhere for vaccines and going to other suppliers, they only did so in January of 2021. We know that from the public record that the Department of Health wrote to the National Treasury on the 6th or 7th of January this year asking for permission to procure vaccines from other suppliers. And that is far, far too late. But the thing is, those are the mistakes that we know from the public record. We do not know how many more mistakes were made behind the scenes and blunders and errors that were totally avoidable and which could have resulted, if they had not happened, could have resulted in a proper, timeous vaccine rollout much, much earlier to protect so many more lives. And that's why we've got to have a full inquiry. It's not good enough just to ask the odd parliamentary question or ask the minister or the president when he deigns to answer questions from the journalists or members of parliament. You've got to get to the facts by seeing all of the documents, by interviewing all of the role players, the ministers, the officials from the Department of Health and the National Treasury, and getting to the truth. This is Parliament's job. This is a bungle, an error that the executive has made, and Parliament is the institution in our democracy responsible for holding the executive to account. And so Parliament has got to now do its job and get to the bottom of what happened, get to the truth, because South Africans in this case deserve to know why they are still waiting for their vaccines. We know, for example, that up until the rollout of the first Pfizer dose, I think on the 17th of May, just last month, only about 490,000 South Africans had been vaccinated, overwhelmingly as a result of the Sisonke Johnson & Johnson trial. Now, if it wasn't for that trial, the fact is that not a single South African would have been vaccinated until the middle of May. That is totally unacceptable. And it also isn't good enough, as the government and the president himself has often claimed, that this is the result of some kind of so-called vaccine apartheid, with wealthy, rich, developed countries buying up all the vaccines or making their own, and poor countries getting nothing. Because actually, if you compare our vaccine performance, our rollout performance, to countries even poorer and even more on the global periphery than South Africa, many of them are far ahead of us on the vaccine rollout. I think of Kenya, even Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Chile, and many others, far ahead of South Africa on vaccine rollout. Even our neighboring countries in Zimbabwe, Namibia, Botswana, ahead of us. That is unacceptable, and it's not good enough to blame it on vaccine inequity when they are far ahead of us. We've got to get to the bottom of why that is happening. There's got to be full accountability for what has led to this delay. Finally, even the current rollout is far too slow and bedeviled by problems. As you well know from your own friends and family, the SMS system is not working well. People are not getting SMSs even though they have registered among the very first in the country. And so we've got to get to the bottom of how the rollout is going wrong as well. So this inquiry is in two parts, and that's why we've proposed very broad terms of reference. We want to have a full look, detailed look at what led to the delay. Why don't we have enough vaccines right now? And we want to have a look at what is causing the problems in the rollout now. Those are the two parts. Now, let me just close today by saying, I know that some of us are seeing pictures of people getting vaccinated on social media and on the news every day. And some of our friends and family, the elderly at least, have received their vaccines. And that gives us all a lot of comfort. But let's not let that comfort blind us to the facts. This vaccine rollout program is very, very badly organized, executed, and planned by the government. We have a right to know why, who is accountable and who is responsible, and that is why the DA is proposing this inquiry to get to the bottom of it. Thank you, Siv.
Thank you very much, Jordan. And now we will be taking some questions from all of you. And Bongisa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. We have a question from our social media pages. And one of the questions is for Jordan. A question for Jordan is, how much blame should be laid at Treasury's door for the delay in the rolling out of vaccines?
Thank you, Bongisa. It's a crucial question. Let me say that obviously this program has been run by the Department of Health mainly, and also by the presidency and the president's Corona Coordinating Council. But I believe that there is some culpability at the door of the National Treasury. And I want to get to the bottom of what that is. And that's why we are proposing that both Siviwe and I serve as the DA's representatives on this ad hoc committee, so that we can have Siv as the spokesperson on health and me from the Treasury side to get to the bottom of exactly how much culpability is with the Treasury. We know, as I've said from the public record, that certain payment deadlines were missed for COVAX. On the other hand, we know that the Department of Health only asked for permission to procure other vaccines outside of COVAX in early January. So we want to check what really caused the missing of those deadlines. Was it some kind of vaccine skepticism on the part of Treasury, some kind of nascent anti-vax attitude, or was it just bureaucratic ineptitude? Whatever it was, we need to get to the bottom of it and understand what is not on the public record, whether there were more mistakes at Treasury. Thank you.
Here's a question from Lindsay Dentlinger from ENCA. Why do you feel an ad hoc committee is necessary to conduct an inquiry? Is the health portfolio not fit for the job, or is it because of the apparent reluctance to hold the minister accountable, as witnessed during the last engagement on the digital vibes matter?
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I think there's a number of things and there's a number of reasons here. Number one, an ad hoc committee would be able to bring together both, as Jordan has said, both the finance committee from the Treasury side, and would be able to bring together the health elements to this. And there are powers that are given to an ad hoc committee whose sole responsibility would be to investigate and to inquire about why this vaccine rollout has been so incredibly slow. First from the acquisition side, and secondly from the rollout side. So this entire committee's entire function would be to investigate why in 15 months we've only been able to vaccinate such a low number of people, and we'll be able to, through the findings of this committee, be able to put pressure on government to be able to get to its targets that it needs to get of vaccinating 40 million people. We also know that there is precedent in Parliament for this. We know that we've seen with parliamentary inquiries before where it has worked, where there was a multi-party consensus into collecting evidence, into submitting that evidence to the Zondo Commission, like we saw with the ESCOM matter. And so we're of the view here that this is possibly one of the biggest crises in post-democratic South Africa. And so Parliament then, as the oversight body, needs to exercise its role in holding government to account. Then on the issue around the Portfolio Committee, the reality here is that the Portfolio Committee has also due to the majority that is held by ANC members, shielded the minister from being held to account on a number of occasions. As you mentioned, Lindsay, that particularly in that meeting, the last meeting that we held, the ANC closed ranks. They used their numbers to be able to shut down critical questions when the opposition was raising questions around where the minister was, why he wasn't there to be able to account for what had happened in the department. The ANC effectively used their majority in that committee to try and block oversight. And so the other element here is that the Health Portfolio Committee has other functions, right, which is to conduct oversight to various places in the country, to be able to go through, as we are going through now, the public hearings around NHI. And so we're of the view that this is the best course of action, because it brings together various elements and it is put together through the establishment of this ad hoc committee by the Speaker, and its sole function is to investigate who is culpable for, firstly, the delay in acquisition and the delay in the rollout. We had requested the Speaker also at the end of last year that at the beginning of this year, that an ad hoc committee be established for having oversight on the work of the Interministerial Committee. However, that was said to, would be conducted by various committees in Parliament. And so we're of the view now that this particular ad hoc committee would not only be able to have oversight over the work of that IMC, but will be able to look at, firstly, the acquisition and the rollout, where the delays are, and Parliament needs to hold people accountable.
Another question from Jan Gerber from News 24. The DA has called for the establishment of an ad hoc committee related to the pandemic on previous occasions. The Speaker didn't allow it. What will be different this time? And also, shouldn't this be the job of the Portfolio Committee on Health?
Thank you, Jan, for the question around the ad hoc committee. Yes, as I mentioned before, we have requested an ad hoc committee from the Speaker. The Speaker did not decline to do that. At the time, what she said was that it is something that should be brought to the House in the form of a motion, because ultimately it is her job to establish an ad hoc committee in the event that Parliament is not in sitting. And at the time, Parliament was to rise in the coming weeks. And her recommendation was that that matter should be brought to the floor of Parliament in the form of a motion to essentially establish an ad hoc committee that would have oversight over the IMC. But this is a very different request. This is not the same request that we had made before around the ad hoc committee to have oversight on the work of the IMC. That would have been an ongoing job to look at the function of the IMC. Now what we are asking is an inquiry into basically looking at the acquisition and the rollout of the vaccine, who's accountable, where, as Jordan says, we know there are things that are on the public record. It's simply not good enough that Parliament does not know where things went wrong. It's simply not good enough that we rely on the work of the media to expose, for instance, the missed deadlines. That was exposed in the press. We did not know that we had missed deadlines to COVAX. And so it's simply not good enough. If we are saying that Parliament should exercise its role, it's simply not good enough to just simply relegate Parliament to some kind of stakeholder that needs to be pacified. It needs to take an active role in ascertaining who is to blame and where things went wrong, so that we can be able to get to the bottom of this and hold people accountable. That's what happens in a constitutional democracy. And then on the last element, I think I would have answered that is this not the work of the Portfolio Committee of Health? As I had said, the Portfolio Committee of Health does not have the powers that an ad hoc committee would have, where it would essentially pull on various elements that is available to it in Parliament. For instance, having the finance spokespeople on the Portfolio Committee as well, and having a far more holistic look at what has gone wrong on multiple levels. Because this is not just something that should be just established in terms of where things went wrong in the health department, but where things went wrong in terms of government's entire response to this vaccine rollout.
Here are some of the questions from one of our platforms, for our social media platforms. How do you think that Mkhize's digital vibes saga will affect the vaccine rollout? And the second one, I think, is also for Jordan. What are the key priorities? What did Mabuza? Didi Mabuza was allocated as the head of the vaccine procurement program. What is his role now? And is the DA calling for him to be held accountable?
Thank you very much, Bongisa. On the question around the whether or not the allegations that have been leveled against Dr. Mkhize will affect the vaccine rollout, I think this is less to do with the fact that, the DA has long called for the minister to be suspended following the allegations leveled against him. And of course, then he undertook special leave, and now an acting minister has been put in his place. Our main priority now is that the acting minister, alongside the deputy minister and the entire senior management team at the Department of Health, need to be seized with ensuring that we get a vaccine and a vaccine rollout plan quickly. The setback that was announced over the weekend by the FDA and the Johnson & Johnson vaccines means that South Africa now has to get on board with ensuring that there's enough vaccines for rollout. A lot of the vaccine sites which have been prepared across the country are not being utilized because we are not fully in full swing as of yet, where we are vaccinating people at mass. The target was that we should be vaccinating between 250,000 people to hit 300,000 people a day. And we're not meeting those targets. Somewhere, somehow, things are not going well. This is why this parliamentary inquiry is absolutely important. And also, it means that now the work of the department needs to be focused on this, while the investigation into the allegations facing Dr. Mkhize must be investigated by the SIU and the SAPS, as we have reported the matter to that. And we've also reported the matter now to the Ethics Committee in Parliament. But the work of the department now needs to be fully focused on ensuring that South Africans get these life-saving jabs. Jordan?
No, look, what we've got here is a clear executive failure. We do not have vaccines, or not nearly in the quantity that we need to save lives this year in South Africa and reach the 40 million target. We just don't have them. And we are entitled to ask, every South African, but particularly Parliament, is entitled to ask, where are they and how did we get into this position? And I want to know the details. I don't just want to have the platitudes and the kind of oblique and opaque commitments that the President and the Deputy President make in public and in Parliament. I want to know exactly what mistakes were made. We want to see the documents. We want to interview the ministers and the key officials, Minister Mboweni, Deputy President, the Minister of Health, both the former minister and the acting minister, the key directors general from those departments. They should all come and account to Parliament to hand over the contracts, what was paid, to whom, what was agreed, when, what deadlines were missed. There are hundreds of questions that they need to answer. And as I said, South Africans have a right to know this. It is in the public interest at this time of incredible anxiety in our country. It is in the public interest to know these things. And as Siv has said, this is an example of executive failure, and it is Parliament's job to hold the executive to account. So we cannot shy away from that job now. It would be a failure of Parliament to let this slip by and just be satisfied with the government's wishy-washy answers on this issue. So to answer the question from the viewer, I can't say right now whether Deputy President Mabuza is specifically and personally to blame, but that is certainly one of the things that we need to get to the bottom of in the inquiry. And I'd like to start with the tabling of every single vaccine contract that we have signed, with all of the documents attached thereto and all of the prices and amounts that we have paid for that. And from that is a great starting point that we can start digging into this executive failure in great depth. Thank you.
The last question we will ask, also for you, viewer, is coming also from our social media page, is what are the key priorities we want the health ministry to achieve in the absence of Mkhize?
So I'll answer the question and then I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much, Bongisa. There are a number of things, as I said just before now, that the department now needs to be its main focus point now needs to be the vaccine rollout. And it needs to make sure that we are clearing out whatever technical glitches there are in terms of the EVDS system. We need to make sure that we are moving through people who are over the age of 60 as quickly as possible. We had a deadline or a target of reaching 5 million people over the age of 60 by the end of June. We are now in the middle of June. Today is the 15th of June. And I don't think that we're going to be able to get there in terms of the numbers that we are getting through every day. Because the quicker we get through to the people who are over 60 and the quicker we get through to our healthcare workers, then the quicker we can get through to the people who have comorbidities who may not be over 60. Then that is when we are starting to make headway in terms of protecting people who are most vulnerable to this disease as now we are in the throes of a third wave. The reality is that people are still not yet protected because even the people who've had their first jabs are yet to have their second jabs. And so there's a number of moving parts here that the department needs to simply be focused on doing and ensuring that we get this right. But at the same time, we cannot have a situation where the national legislature in the country simply sits back and allows a complete failure by the executive to go unaccounted for. In any other constitutional democracy, questions would be asked, and simply governments would need to account and bring to the fore where things went wrong and point to where mistakes were made and how these things are going to be rectified. It is absolutely our job, and we cannot simply sit back and not do that job and not do it well. And so thank you very, very much for joining us this afternoon for this press conference. A press statement will be issued, and which will have the letter to the Speaker and the proposed motion that will be going out shortly. And just to remind you, tomorrow we have our National Youth Day event that is going to be taking place and will be broadcast live on all our platforms at 10:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.